All right, hi there, everyone. Welcome to Believe in Bills. Adam Benigni, Sal Maiorana. And at center, as you look at this, a very special guest and a gentleman that we're all very familiar with, Vic Carucci. Vic, I don't even know how to list your resume. I mean, we don't have enough time on this show to get through it. But colleague, Sports Talk Live, Buffalo, Pro Football Hall of Fame voter, currently Sirius XM NFL host, longtime lead columnist, beat writer for the Buffalo News, and former Cleveland Browns employee. Vic, am I leaving anything out?
It just means I'm old. That's all.
Yes, it does.
That's right.
It means you're really old.
It means I've been around this business a long
By the way,
Yeah.
since we've added Vic to the show today, that now pushes us to about 110 years of combined experience on this beat. So, yeah, we got more than a century worth of opinions here. Great.
I was going to go with it. I had that number. I'm glad that our math lines up, Sal. 110 years.
Yeah.
And here's the worst part. I feel like there were times when I was mentoring these two young gentlemen.
You were.
Oh, yeah. Right.
Vic, you remember me. My first time there was 1982, which I think was your first year.
First year in Buffalo.
I was in college as I'm doing an AP stringer gig, and Vic was just in Buffalo. So we go back way, way back.
You were a whippersnapper.
I was.
Still is. You know that. And for better or for worse, I'm clearly the junior member here. So, all right, let's get to it. A lot to get to with this team. And Vic, you've been at training camp, a number of times, and obviously are always dialed into what's going on with this team. Let's start with the most recent news, and then we'll kind of widen the scope of this. No comment from defensive coordinator Bobby Babich today. Matt Milano, who's obviously working his way back from that horrific leg injury in London last year, key linebacker, now dealing with an arm injury. We don't know the extent of it. I guess, Vic, we'll start with you and the potential impact of that. We've seen what life is without Matt Milano, and the thought of that extending is no one likes thinking about that at all.
Before training camp, as I was listing storylines for a piece I was doing for WGRZ.com, I had on there that a healthy Matt Milano who is able to participate fully in camp for most of, if not all of camp, would be one of the greatest developments for this football team. The fact that he is out now for, again, whatever is described as an arm injury, I'm not going to speculate on severity, but just returning from obviously the broken leg that he had suffered and other damage in his leg from that London game. It's a long road back. And my feeling was if he were back this soon from the leg portion of whatever he was dealing with, that would be amazing. So is there a bit of maybe benefit from him not being pushed too hard to go back, because that could create a setback? That was something in the back of my mind. I'm not surprised Bobby Babich had no response to it, because you leave that, the coordinator is not going to handle that. That's the head coach's job. So I would like to know, obviously we all would, if there is an additional thing that's setting him back, but they need him. We know that. And without him, a defense that we saw on display in that preseason opener, again, not a ton to take away from that, but there was a lot of concern as to how that defense looked.
Hey, look, my opinion, Vic, and I'm guessing that we all agree on this. If you looked at what the Bills did in the offseason with the draft and with the free agent signings that they made, I would argue that the most important addition for 2024 was going to be a healthy Matt Milano, right? I mean, this is an all-pro linebacker that they did not have for the final 2/3 of last year. You bring him back into the mix, that's like a bonus free agent signing, really.
Absolutely.
And now, let's face it, Milano has had a lot of injury problems. He has missed time. He's also played a lot with injuries that have impacted him, even though he's played through them and played pretty well. He just can never seem to be 100%. And now he's on a damaged leg, and we don't know what this arm injury might be. I think that's a pretty big concern. I guess the only good news is that it's August, whatever it is, 14th today, and there's a month before the season starts. So hopefully he'll be okay, but it's definitely a concern.
Yeah, it is a concern, and with him working his way back in, and with the inexperience and the injuries we've seen in other areas of that defense, he kind of brings so much together in terms of his role and the range that he provides, what he's able to do, both in coverage and in other supporting what happens up front as well. So a huge storyline to follow. There, we wait for the latest on that news. Also. Receiver Chase Claypool to IR. Look, this was a guy they took a shot on, and at this point, it just hasn't worked out.
Yeah, I thought when they brought him in, it had experiment written all over it, right? It was a flyer. Hey, if there's something there, great. But if not, it's no big risk, financial risk or cap risk loss. He's a name, a recognizable name, but he's the bounce around guy who is looking for finally to maybe get some traction after much disappointment elsewhere. And there's a base reason for some of the disappointment, which has more to do, I think, above his shoulder pads than below. But right now, dealing with this health issue, we're not going to know, obviously, what his role might be with the Bills. Could that change later on? I'll leave the door slightly open, but guys, I've seen this whole receiver thing as really just a collection of maybes. I don't think there's one solid person in the newcomers of the receiving corps, and that includes Keon Coleman in my book, that is going to be a wow factor. Again, it could all change, but basically what the Bills are saying is, Josh Allen, your job is to elevate any of these people who are going to catch passes.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Claypool thing, I agree with you, Vic. It was kind of an experiment, but you know what? It was an experiment that I was kind of hoping was going to work because, he came into the league with the Steelers. He was playing with a terrible Ben Roethlisberger, right, at the end of his career, and he still had two pretty decent, especially his rookie year. He was an impactful player coming out of Notre Dame, and then I don't know what happened. It just went off the cliff for him, did nothing with the Bears and Dolphins, comes to Buffalo trying to resurrect it. And I was thinking, there's a guy who's 6'3" or 4", 220 pounds. That's the kind of guy that you could really utilize in an offense, especially with Josh Allen at quarterback. And I had these visions of maybe him being a red zone guy, right? A guy that was physical down there, could give them something they haven't really had in the red zone. Who's been their red zone receiver? It really hasn't been anybody. When you get Dawson Knox, maybe has been their best guy down around the goal line. So I thought he was going to be a guy that they could really, give him a role like that. Maybe third down, but certainly red zone. And now I don't think it's going to happen. There's all these layers with this IR thing because, the NFL just can't make anything easy and cut and dry. So now there's 25 different things that can happen. Right, but I think the bottom line is they're going to put him on IR. They're going to do the settlement. And he's probably going to move on. So I think it probably is over for Chase Claypool here.
We were going to get to the whole receiver situation and Josh Allen a little bit later, but since we're kind of on it now, let's go there. And probably big picture, Vic, you alluded to the fact that it's Josh Allen's offense. It's not the receiver that makes the quarterback better. It's the quarterback that elevates the receivers. So we've seen that, historically in terms of NFL offense.
Don't tell that to Stefon Diggs, though. Don't tell Stefon Diggs that.
That's exactly right.
He'll tell you the opposite.
Right, which is right where I'm going.
Yeah.
Vic, project your view of this offense without an established A1 receiver and moving on from Stefon Diggs.
It's a problem. Let's be honest about, and the Bills should be honest about, and I think they are, at least internally. They may not say this publicly. Josh Allen may not say it publicly. Josh Allen may privately believe that he's relieved to no longer have the, quote, pressure of having to get the football to Stefon Diggs and have Stefon Diggs constantly remind him that he's always open and that he's a difference maker. Guess what? He is a difference maker. He was a difference maker. The Bills elevated to the level of a Super Bowl contender a few years back over the course of the time. That ties in. It's not a coincidence when Stefon arrived. Allen to Diggs is what put this team on the Super Bowl map and on that trajectory. Taking him away, regardless of the circumstances, is still taking a lot away. This team decided it was better to pay more cap-wise to not have him on the roster than keep him around for one more year at least, where it would be a cheaper separation cap-wise, right? That told you the degree that that Sean McDermott, that Brandon Beane, perhaps Josh, could no longer tolerate the personality. But guys, Stefon Diggs wouldn't be the first, quote, difficult personality on a roster. The Bills have dealt with this. Go back, Sal and Adam, to the years of covering the Super Bowl Bills. Difficult personalities. I mean, it was a clash all the time. They found their way through it and found their way to 4 consecutive Super Bowls. Some things you have to manage and deal with. They decided they didn't want to manage this any longer. So he's out the door along with a lot of catches, a lot of yards, and big play potential, coverage pressure on opposing defenses. And Gabe Davis gone as well, different levels, but you take away your top 2 guys, and what do they have right now? Again, more questions. I'm not saying they won't find some answers, but I can't sit here right now and tell you they're fine. You go from no Stefon Diggs to whatever they have now. Now you won't feel it. They're feeling it. They're going to feel it at least, short term, possibly longer term.
So here's where I stand on that, Vic. I was actually okay with the move to move on from Diggs for several reasons. Number one, though, the salary cap hit wasn't exorbitant this year. They're paying $3.5 million more than they were going to pay him anyways, and now he's off the books for the next 2 years. And I have to assume that Brandon Beane has a plan for those 2 years to utilize that savings. But what I also thought they were going to do, Vic, and I'm not satisfied with how it turned out, I thought he was going to make a more significant move on draft day, not going down to get Keon Coleman, going up to get one of those top 3 or 4 guys. That's what I thought was in the works when they moved on from Diggs, and they did not do that. So they signed Curtis Samuel, who is a guy, right? He'll be a nice player, but he's not elite Stefon Diggs. He's not even Stefon Diggs, who was, not the same player I thought in the second half of last year. That's not even who Curtis Samuel is. Keon Coleman, as you mentioned, I don't think he's ready to become elite in any way. That's going to take some time. So I was okay with the move, and I understood the reasons behind it. But like I said, I thought there was, and maybe even they were going to get somebody better than Curtis Samuel. Maybe they were going to go out and get someone better. They didn't do either of those 2 things. So that's why we look at the Diggs move now, and it is a little troubling what's going on.
I hear you. But here's my problem with everything you said. And you're not wrong to say the anticipation of something more significant than going down, trading right out of the round to pursue, more elite receivers that, and again, they are ranked elite coming into the draft. We still don't know what any of those guys is going to do in the NFL. That's one thing. And here was the other fallacy. Those who were clamoring, when I say those, I don't know how many were in the media per se or really followed the situation, but there was a clamor for what? Go after Brandon Ayuk. Go after make a trade for some big-time guy. But you make that deal, and what happened to the receiver market? It blew up. You just got out of cap hell. You have done all these moves to reduce your cap, cut some big-time guys, Mitch Morse among them, to lower that cap number because you were on that road of being a contending team, paying the cap number that you had to pay or dealing with cap issues that you had to deal with that. And what are you going to do? You got rid of the Diggs salary, or at least much of it, to turn around and pay another receiver top level receiver money in that market, which I'm going to guess Brandon Beane anticipated, exploded. And now you're going to be right back in cap jail with a quarterback and a receiver. You've got to have other pieces to be a contender.
All right. But what about the notion? What about what happened to Diggs in the second half of the season? What about what we saw? What about the drops? What about not being able to make the catch with the season on the line right in his hands against the Kansas City Chiefs in the postseason? Yeah. What about the drama off the field, the cryptic social stuff and everything? And I get the personality issue and all of that. Add it all up, put it in a broader context, and this is a team that's clearly transitioning in terms of its roster, and it's Brandon Beane's job to keep this Super Bowl window with Josh Allen open as long as it can possibly be there. To me, there's a broader context.
Maybe I'm jaded. But I'm going to say 2 words: bickering Bills.
Yeah,
And it looked like the end of the world, guys. End of the world. Where who's feuding with who? Jim Kelly calling out House Ballard. Thurman Thomas calling out Jim Kelly. Andre Reed unhappy with whatever. Bruce Smith. How many times did I get cornered by contract issue? There was just one big difference. No social media. The social media was our media. It was Sal Maiorana. It was Adam Benigni. It was your show. It was anybody who had microphones and camera. That's how that and notepads. We used to use those. That's the difference, guys. It's just exacerbated by that. But I'm telling you, some things never change. It's how you manage it. Bill Poyer and Marv Levy figured it out. They decided to figure it out. I'm not going to suggest Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott are wrong to do what they did or picked up on it, but you can't tell me that it was a question of we just don't want the nonsense. Okay, but there could be a price to pay for not wanting to manage that.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it had as much to do with the Diggs drama and his stupid social media accounts. And that would be a silly football decision if Brandon Beane actually considered that. I think this had to do with salary cap. And again, this is my personal opinion, guys. I don't think Diggs was the same player in the second half of the year. It was troubling that he went up against some really good cornerbacks and they shut him down. And I just think he's 30 years old now. I think he has started the slight decline. And I think the Bills, Marv Levy, right? With your buddy Fred Sproles. Remember that whole thing? You got to get rid of him a year early before it's a year late. And Fred was pissed off. And, he missed out on the Super Bowl run. But there is something to that. You move on from a guy before it's too late and that player hurts you. I'm not saying Diggs would have hurt them this year. He's still a very good player. But I saw the slight decline, and I got to believe that that's what drove the decision more than, him and his brother saying that he needs to get out of Buffalo. That was a bunch of nonsense.
If he was on the roster right now, gentlemen, just a question. Who's your number one receiver on 10?
Obviously, it's Diggs. No doubt. Diggs.
We all agree on that. Okay. See, we find a way to reach an agreement here. But there's issues that go far beyond receiver with this football team, and we may have seen some of them in the preseason opener. To call it a flop is an understatement against the Chicago Bears this past Saturday at home. And we've all talked about this with each other at various points. The thing that stands out to me the most is the physicality issue. The fact they were just physically manhandled in that game and dominated early on as well when the would-be starters were in there. That's a significant or potential very significant problem.
Yeah, it's and again, I'm trying to temper reaction, as I think we all should, from our first preseason game, and it wouldn't be the first time again in even the greatest Super Bowl run Bills history where preseason just looked awful, and the players looked like they quote took the day off, that they just didn't feel it. Okay, so there could be part of that at work, but put aside vanilla scheming, because that goes both ways. And it wasn't like, Caleb Williams, impressive to see the physical talent that he had and marching that team down a couple of times, but doing it against a defense that absolutely wasn't playing its, quote, regular stuff. But physically, at the line of scrimmage, both ends, that was troubling. And I think two things that really bothered Sean McDermott, the obvious one being the 11 penalties and 8 pre-snappers, but beyond that, is on the defensive side, Sean's roots. What was happening, guys? High, poor form tackling. Guys were allowed to get bare ball carriers, whether they were runners, running backs, or receivers after the catch, were just allowed to get so many extra yards because there was no form, no wrap-up in bringing them down. I'm sure that drove Sean right through the roof. Do we remember what happened at last year when they played Pittsburgh and the physical beating they took there? And what did Sean do? Put the starters back out for the third game.
Yeah, you're right. There was a poor display on every aspect in that game Saturday. To me, and you again, dating ourselves, Vic, remember when they used to practice and tackle in practice and actually work on form and technique? They don't do it anymore. Right. So you get in these games, and there's problems sometimes when you're trying to tackle guys. That's one It's one problem that I see league-wide, though. There's so much poor tackling in this league. So you got to hope that in the next month they can get that figured out and be much better. Like Adam and I talked the other day about physicality. They just got their asses kicked against the Bears. It was really disappointing. You know, it's one thing to lose a preseason game. Who cares? You know, you make some mental mistakes or this and that. But to get pushed around the way they did, I think really had to get under McDermott's skin a little bit. So I would expect that this workout on Thursday will be spirited down in Pittsburgh. And then I think we're going to come out. I think the Bills are going to come out and show a lot more physicality and more intentionality to what they're doing. Whether they win or lose, who cares? But that's the thing I'll be looking for is, are they going to be competitive? Because they weren't competitive last week.
Before we get to the joint practices and the matchup with the Steelers, because that is a topic I think we should address, and you know, the kind of joint practices, how common they are now and how much a part of the future they are and what they could do for this football team. I want to ask you about, you mentioned the departure, Vic, of Mitch Morse, and it's a topic that Sal and I have talked about. You know, offensive line was an area of stability for them last year. And now they make the economic decision to move on from Mitch Morse. You know, what that does to the dynamic and the kind of some shift on the offensive line, right? Not to mention the fact, the relationship he had with Josh and the fact he called the protections. How much of an impact do you potentially see that having?
I think it's huge. Of all the things that happened this offseason, including the Diggs trade, I felt the loss of Mitch Morse. That's the one that like blindsided me because number one, and again, maybe it's just proof that I don't know what I'm talking about football, but I thought he was the best, you know, center. The best gave the Bills the best season of all his time with the Bills, and obviously they didn't consider it good enough. I thought he had elevated his play. I thought the line was playing its best football. Aaron Cromer's crew came together. Obviously, there was good health along the way and everything else. And until that Kansas City game where we saw, you know, Deion Dawkins, Chris Jones toss him into Josh, disrupt a potential game-winning touchdown throw and all that. But by and large, I thought that group played exceptionally well. Mitch is such a vital part, had been a vital part, not only of anchoring that team, of anchoring the offense, much more of a leader than anybody on offense, and that includes Josh Allen. I think Josh took his cues from Mitch. I always called Mitch, in my mind, I don't know that I wrote this or said it on air, the dad he's the locker room dad. Every team has a player who has that dad type of title, even though he's a very young man in realistic terms to me. But I felt that level of maturity, calmness. I think they're going to miss that. And Connor McGovern, now, and this is the other thing they did. They took a left guard and moved him to center. They take a new, a replacement, obviously, for Edwards at that David Edwards at that left guard position, or whoever ultimately fills it. That's two changes on a line. That's big. That's a big disruption.
That's the point that I made the other day. Adam, agree with me. You upset two positions on that line, which it just didn't make sense. I agree with you, Vic. That was the one move that he made this offseason that I just did not understand. Why you would do that. Yeah, he was going to cost $8 million. Guess what? He was worth the $8 million. He was worth the $8 million. Absolutely. He might have been worth re-signing for even further, for extending his contract. I forget when his contract actually is up. Maybe it is this year. That's a guy, he was only was he 31 years old? Yeah. Offensive linemen can play till they're 37, 38. I did not get that move, and we're going to see, because I'm not sold on Connor McGovern yet, and I'm damn well not sold on David Edwards. David Edwards was a reserve last year. I mean, he was a backup player. He's a replacement level player, and now you're counting on him to be your left guard. I just did not understand that.
So now, down to Pittsburgh they go, and we've seen this through the years. I remember Sal and I were talking about this, Vic, years ago. This was when the Pagulas were in the process of buying the team. I mean, Ralph Wilson had passed on. Ownership was in transition, but they went down. That was the time frame of it, right? They went down to Latrobe, which is where the Steelers were holding camp, and they were like the Steelers. The DBs came out like popping right away. There were like 2 or 3 fights in the first 10 minutes of that practice. So Sean and We lost Sal there, but we'll just kind of keep going here and hope that he can rejoin. Sean and Mike Tomlin have a very good relationship, but we know the competitive nature of this. If physicality was going to be an issue, let's see if we can get Sal back in here for a second.
Sure.
There he is. Let's bring him back. All right, Sal, you're back, buddy. You got us?
I'm here. I don't know what this situation.
All right. All right. We're just talking about Vic and I. We're just talking about the physical nature.
I just elbowed him out of the way.
That's right. He's still
wrong elbow.
Right.
I just gave Spectrum more of my money to upgrade my internet yesterday, and I'm still having trouble. So it's really great.
All right. But it's
Spectrum and the Yankees making Sal's life miserable.
That's right. But we all know it's how you respond to the adversity that matters most.
Yes.
So how does this Bills team respond to what happened in that first preseason game and what should be a very physical environment in these joint practices?
Look, and I know we said it a little earlier, and Sal referenced it. After an embarrassing showing, when I say embarrassing, it's not the score I'm talking about. It's the stuff that you see, putting aside game plans, putting aside everything, mano, getting physically handled. And that was true, again, both sides of the ball, especially the offensive line. This is one of the things that we're looking at with this football team. I think we'd agree on this. When you remake what they've done and think about the way Joe Brady guided this offense through the second half of last year, what was the core approach? Core approach was more physical, more running, right? We saw, I think they led the league in attempts over that span, if I have the stat right, rush attempts. So that to me is a telling if you're going to be this physical team, I think you got to show signs of it. And we didn't see that. Their O-line got zero push, and that was a source of frustration for Sean McDermott. So Steelers, every bit as physical as any defense in the league. We know Mike Tomlin has his guys. If they're going to do nothing else, they're going to have to win those physical battles. You know that has been the mantra that he has been pushing, not just for this week, but all along. So will those practices, I think they are going to be chippy. We're going to hear about fights. We're going to hear about, because that's what teams do when they practice together. They fight. It's a tradition they have to uphold, whatever. And then in the game itself, that's what I'm going to look for. Is that O-line going to get some push? You don't have to rush for, James Cook doesn't have to have gigantic runs, but he better be having more consistent runs, or whoever's carrying the ball, that go past the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, I mean, we heard the excuses last week. They didn't game plan for the Bears. They only had 3 or 4 vanilla running plays in the game, right? All this baloney, right? Look, beat the man in front of you, and they didn't do that last week. I understand they didn't game plan for the Bears, and if they changed their defense, they really weren't prepared. Just beat the guy in front of you, and they did not do that. They had 3 yards on 6 carries, the first 2 running backs with the first string line. That's not good enough, guys.
All right, gentlemen, that concludes our time here on Believe on Bills. I think we're all anxious to see how this team responds, and maybe you don't want to read too much into the preseason, but at least begin to get a read on the response of this team, what they kind of have as the preseason winds down and we look toward the opener against the Arizona Cardinals. I want to thank Vic Carucci for joining us here on the show. Vic, looking forward to getting started real soon with you. Sports Talk Live Buffalo. Monday nights, 7 o'clock this year as opposed to 7:30 a new time for us. And Sal Maiorana, Rochester Democrat and Chronicle. To call you 2 veterans would be an understatement.
So you're moving it up to 7 o'clock, so your jammies earlier for you guys?
That's exactly right. Exactly.
I was going to wear my jammies during the show, but we might have a different studio setup, so I got to stand. So.
Right? No, we got to stand. No desk this year.
Yeah, so
that's a whole,
I have to put on the jammies later.
Vic, we'll talk wardrobe. Later. And as we wrap it up here, again, would like to again congratulate Vic on his election to the Greater Buffalo Sports.
Thank you so much.